our interactions that we think are personal, that's not primarily what's going on. It's the personal interaction, and even insofar as it is, it's not a priority. It doesn't need to be a priority. So, but there's a really key difference between observing people's physical presence and their body language to see, are you receiving this? Am I getting through? Am I being effective? There's a world of difference between that and thinking about what people are thinking of you, as if they were people, rather than, I'm hesitating on what term to use. Meat puppets came to the mind, organic vessels, just physical bodies, like that cat behind Kate. Like that cat doesn't have a sense of itself as being a person, doesn't have a personal history. Doesn't mean it doesn't have memories though. But it's very different from a personal history, because a personal history is a story that is made up of memories, actually reproductions of memories, not actual body memories. You can't make a personal history out of body memories. I mean, just try it. You can make a personal history out of mental memories, which are images, thoughts, to some extent sounds and whatnot. We can fill it in, like we can make a movie, but essentially it's a sort of, well, for me anyway, it's a vague kind of imagery of people and places and times with a mental narrative about what I think about it. That's a personal history. Kate's cat doesn't have that, but it is organically present, or more so than we are, could say. So what was my point about that? Yeah, so we can have a connection, a real living, real-time connection with each other as organic bodies, beings, but that's not personal, or that doesn't, I mean, is that personal? That can be examined. So what's the context for this again? Social enlightenment and the purpose of a group like this, how it relates to the possibility of becoming socially enlightened, of becoming liberated from deliberation, and what does that look like? What's a group that facilitates that process? What's it like? On the one hand, it is similar to I don't know about conventional, but a more or less recognizable idea of a support group where people come together with a shared orientation and create a space together where there is support for vulnerability, openness and honesty, where people feel safe enough to try to be themselves and risk the discomfort of the fear of being ostracized or condemned or judged or simply not liked for being themselves in ways they haven't dared to be before. That's fairly conventional. The other side of that is kind of the opposite, but complementary. It's a place where you will have your every weakness and foible magnified and picked apart and ruthlessly confronted by either at least one person who's running the group, that would be me, but preferably actually everybody to some degree or another, having zero tolerance for bullshit and just not letting you get away with anything. So that's that really. It's like the curse of self-awareness. You could say, well, without self-awareness we'd be screwed, but see, the entities really, you could say, I mean, we're going to talk in terms of entities, they really know how to get us. If they can't get us from one angle, they get us from the other angle. It's like the left and the right wing. The social engineers, of course, they control both parties and all parties. That's the game. The game is to control everything. The entities are similar. If they can't control people with ignorance, they'll control them with awareness, and they'll co-opt the awareness in such a way that it neutralizes any kind of awareness of them and what they're doing. You could say that about the whole of psychology to some degree. But specifically, this is to do with awareness around how to approach the difficulties we have in our lives in a way that resolves them or simply circumnavigates them. Because let's face it, our life is always going to have difficulties and problems. And if we're older and wiser, we might have less, but then we're older. So we're going to have more ones that we can't circumnavigate or resolve, such as old age. So yeah, it's just always there. Like life is a battlefield. And I say it's a battlefield between the human soul and the entities that are trying to capture it, just to keep it really, really simple and strip away all the other stuff. That's a helpful context for any issues and problems, and a way to not take the issues themselves too seriously by taking what's behind them more seriously. And so recognizing that we can resolve the effects, we can address the effects, but if we don't address the cause, the entities will just move on to some other, they'll do another chess move, and they'll check us in some other way until they eventually get us in a corner and it's checkmate. So if we're constantly reacting to the effects or to the issues or to the problems, we're not getting to the cause, and eventually we run out of time. And then it's too late, and it's checkmate. So that's the first layer of the approach. I'm just thinking how that relates to a no. I suppose the first no is to oneself, is to one's internal patterns or strategies that one knows essentially don't work. I mean, it's why one of the principles of these meetings is address your drug or substance abuse, address your pornography use, address these concrete examples of things that you need to say no to in order to get more of your life force available, freed up. But that's just the beginning. As Simon K. well knows, it can end up, I mean, it does have to end up with every thought, every move. It's the warrior's way, in quotes. It's the reason it's called the warrior's way. It's just constant. It's an awareness of being constantly at war with one's weaknesses, but without turning into some Gurdjieffian or Castanedan sociopath. Being warm and open and honest and vulnerable and relaxed in that process. It's really relax, show up, stay relaxed, keep observing, don't react, keep remembering whatever you need to remember to not react, that you don't really know the nature of the trap that you've fallen into. You don't know how it was designed, you don't know when it was designed, you don't know how you fell into it, although there you have the advantage of looking back. When did you say yes when you needed to say no? But therefore you don't actually know how to get out of it. Chinese finger trap, let's say, or the kind of trap I'm talking about, you can only get out of it by being relaxed. You have to be flexible enough. It's like the monkey in the jar thing, there's that anecdote about how do you catch a monkey? Well, you put a nut in a jar because it'll reach in and grab the nut, but then it can't get its hand out and it won't let go of the nut. So then you've caught the monkey. That's how the entities do it. They create something, or they show us something they know that we want, and they create a thing around it that when we go for it, we're caught. But the thing that's holding us is our desire for the thing that's in the trap. That's what keeps us in the trap. So what do you want? That's the thing. I was thinking of asking that question today, actually, because at the beginning, because I was thinking, what do I want? Why am I coming to this meeting? Or something like that. But now it's very specific and general for everybody. I'm going to make this a general principle. You can test it. If you're trapped in any way in your life, if you're stuck, it's because you want something. So if you let go of the thing you want, you're free. I'm making it a very simple principle. It's probably Buddhism or something like that. It doesn't mean it's easy, because you might end up feeling, well, you've got to let go of all desires, and then you might end up going crazy. But just specifically, a given situation, you're still on reconnaissance. You're still gathering data because you don't know how you got into this mess in the first place. You haven't sorted out the patterns that got you into the mess. So A, you can't get out. I'm saying you haven't. And B, you don't know that you won't go into the similar trap. So even if you don't think it's true, it can be a useful strategic approach to consider it, that you're there gathering data. Therefore, it's win-win. You don't have to try and fix the situation or get what you want, because just being there and observing, you're getting something useful. And that, I mean, that applies to all of you all of the time in your interaction, family dynamics and all the rest, partners. That, well, the first thing, the less you're trying to get something, the more free you are to be spontaneous and, martial artist in there. Because, I mean, that's the basic principle. The person who's trying to get something is always at a disadvantage. The person who's coming in doesn't want anything. They have a whole lot more balance, equilibrium, and flexibility. But there was another one that I've probably gone lost now. Just in terms of being calm and relaxed, it's kind of the same thing said differently. That all of the difficult human interactions that you're involved in, the easiest, quickest, surest way to make them more smooth is to change yourself, to change your own approach, as opposed to always going in thinking, how can you change the other people? How can you change the overall situation? That can happen, and that can be done consciously. I'm not saying one shouldn't ever try to influence anyone. But is it coming from a place of discomfort? I can't deal with the way things are. Or is it coming from a place of acceptance? I can handle the way things are, and I'm learning a lot by observing it, but they definitely could be better. So let me put a little pressure here or put a little pressure there. Like a masseur doesn't just go straight in. They have to ask questions, find out what problems are at a conscious level, and then they start feeling around, and they feel like they don't just hammer away. It's got to be responsive. Right? To be responsible is to be responsive, and to be able to respond. And finally, all of this is about clearing out entities, so it's not even like the desired result and desired outcome isn't even on your mental map yet. It might never be. You might find that you're clearing entities without ever really knowing it, but you'll see the results.
I've just been thinking about that thing, I think, there in terms of strategy. How always strategizing a way to liberate myself from misery, from entity attack, from creating my own misery. But when you first mentioned that our lives were miserable, and I concur that it's been the case for everybody. But I also thought, well, there's no exit, and I've just been thinking, then even Jesus had no exit. Even a liberated person has no exit from misery in this life. The Buddha apparently died of sort of poisoning. Jesus was crucified. Other liberated people die of cancer and ill health. It's like there isn't any actual exit.
Well, Jesus came back. It was his timeline, because it's Good Friday coming up. So if you want to stick to that template, then Jesus, his life ended in misery, but then he was resurrected in glory. Buddha, I don't know. Dave is the only living example that I can refer to, which is pretty amazing if you can refer to one. He has said, and more importantly, he has exhibited that for him, life existence is pure, unadulterated joy. And as I say, he's exhibited that. I see it seems to be true. I've spent enough time with him to say that I don't think he ever seems anything but joyful, even when he's haranguing and other stuff. It's not necessarily that he's bouncing around like Tigger, but he's always in good spirits. I would say that I'm generally in quite good spirits at these meetings, and then generally I would say I'm not a stranger to joy. So it depends. I mean, I don't want to get too theoretical about what Simon O'Brien said. In fact, I don't want to get theoretical at all. Just to say that, to me, misery is something that was put in us. Let's put it that way. It is the state of the world, but why is it in the state of the world? Because the world has been shaped by entity-infested humans. And those humans are thereby being run on misery. They're being constantly, on a drip feed of misery, like toxins. And so if the water's toxic, if the air's toxic, if the food is toxic, you can't help but be toxic. But the point I'm making is that misery is something that's been put in us, and that if it's strong enough, if we get overwhelmed by it and we don't do anything to address it for too long, thinking of my own family members now who've passed and gone, then we lose all touch with the fundamental principle of organic existence, and I suppose beyond organic existence, which I'm going to say is joy. Joy is the baseline of existence.
So it brings
Love.
back to the idea of strategy, that we actually do need to strategize our way out of this entity problem. And I mean, Dave strikes me as someone who's lived a healthy life. I don't know how much, if he does rigorous exercise, but I'm sure he walks, and I know he does his energy movements, and I know he eats healthy, and he doesn't imbibe of any toxins or addictions. So that is one sort of purification type of strategy. Because I don't think we can avoid, like when you're in the matrix and in the no exit situation, like I'm constantly starting to strategize ways to liberate myself from the issues that bother me. And I think you're right. I took a lot from what you said about the desire, and that is some sort of classic Buddhism. There is that the desire is the cause of the suffering. So letting go of desire is the way to.
So, well, it's a bit of it's potentially a catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the strategy,
Exactly.
insofar as the strategy is based on a desire for a given outcome, it will probably fail us, and yet we can't be completely without strategy, because then we've got no principles to live by. And so,
Even a warrior is a strategy.
well, especially a warrior,
Yeah.
I'd say that is what being a warrior is. It's basically constantly needing and using a strategy. But there's something about, it's like having a safety net or something like that. It's the thing that gets you on the high wire. But once you're on the high wire, and even before you got on that highway, that if you're gonna keep going all the way to the other side, the safety net's not going to be there at a certain point. So the safety net or the strategy is just the thing that gets us actually heading towards the exit. Because without it, we just would be clueless. We would just be overwhelmed. So it's a bit of a ruse. It's a bit of a trick, as what they say about the spirit and about Jesus coming as a thief in the night. Like divine fear, grace, it comes in such a way that it has to circumnavigate the mind. It has to trick us into being receptive to it. And essentially, it's what these meetings are about. Like I'm trying to allow myself to be tricked by the spirit so that I can trick you into letting something into your awareness and taking over your hardware, so to speak, taking over your choices. So it's extremely tricky because we're relying on not just the tools of the internet, bad enough, but we're relying on the tools of the mind to have a talking, to talk back and forth. And then with the mind, we're referring to our personal histories and our memories and our false identities. It's all entity fostered. None of that gets to us except by the entities. They don't necessarily create it. In the case of the language, they probably even create it. But all of our experiences, they didn't create those experiences. or even exactly the memories, but they're the system through which the memories have been stored, like the Matrix. So we're really fucked, pardon my French. So that's back to the misery anyway. Back to the misery. So much of our conditioning and the things that we've turned to have been ways to get out of a feeling of being trapped, a feeling of being miserable, and therefore have prevented us from addressing the cause, because we're escaping the effects. We don't want to feel the effects, but if you don't feel and experience the effects, go in there and just feel and observe the effects. Feel how horrible and miserable and uncomfortable it is, and take responsibility for it. We all have to take responsibility for the shit fest that we've created out of our lives. No one else did it. I mean, of course, our parents set us off on the wrong course, and their parents did it to them. But so what? Like, we can't ask them to fix it, and blaming them doesn't make it any better either. So therefore, again, the responsibility is on us. Finally, and I mean, all of my life's work really has been about diagnosing the condition, mapping how, and I never offered a solution. Now I'm working more towards that, but it's extremely tricky because, not because, it's tricky because of what I just said. If we're trying to fix the problems using the same thinking that created the problems, then we just create more problems. But beside that, seeing that you're in hell, each of you, seeing that your lives have been tainted by misery, day in, day out, that should be enough. That should be enough to course correct you. That's why you're miserable. So that you adjust. It's strategic in the sense that the mind has to be included, because if the mind isn't included, it gets up to no good anyway. So include it in some way and say, okay, mind, here, you can do this. You can tell me what to eat, or rather you can keep track of what to eat. You can keep track of how I use my life force, whether I watch porn and stuff. You get with these itineraries and stuff, the mind can be useful, and that seems like a strategy. But if you think about what I'm saying, in terms of misery being physiological and psychological and even energetic, spiritual, a consequence of our misuse of our energy, then where's the strategy? You adjust. There's a bit of trial and error, but that's hardly a strategy. You adjust in order to, back to the massage thing. Like, you could say the masseur has a strategy to check out where the blockages are. That's the strategy, but it's a very simple one because it's done by touch. It's just like you feel the knot. You don't have to draw a map. You just have to be responsive. So that's what I have to say about that. Because the spirit, without the spirit, there's nothing, and with the spirit, nothing else is needed. The spirit's the only player here. That's the good news and the bad news. It's extremely bad news for our identities that have been plotting for our whole lives, like B-movie villains twirling its moustache to achieve the various goals that, if we achieve, it's telling us we will be happy and satisfied. In fact, no, that's the bad guy that's trying to trick us into thinking that we can turn stone into bread and have power over all the kingdoms and everything will be great. So it's bad news for that part, because it basically gets a cosmic no and gets its head cut off. There's many heads, but to our souls, to our life force, it's extremely good news. It is the Holy Gospel. I'm not saying it's easy, because I'm looking at you all and thinking about myself, and it's like, well, what do we do then? It's like, well, kind of nothing. It's because most of the things we do are driven by the villain of the story. That's the other side. I mean, yeah, you can read your Bible and you become Christians, but I said it as succinctly as I ever said the other day, talking to a Christian. I said, how did I say it? Only Jesus can tell you if you're a Christian or not. Anyone who says they're a Christian, they're full of shit. Only Jesus knows who the Christians are. So it's not, even like reading the Bible and those kind of things, that's all been co-opted too. I hope that what we do here, even though it's online, obviously that's a big drawback, but I hope it's approaching a doing that's valid, which is simply surrounding ourselves with other bodies, souls who are orienting towards liberation. Since I've used that word, I'll use it again. And therefore becoming more consciously accountable to the truth. Or to reality. So it's a bit like, looking at Paul again, but it's a bit like an AA meeting, except it's, what would it be called? Entity-holics Anonymous. We're here to admit that we're addicted to entities, and we need to trust in a higher power and just turn our back on that life-devouring addiction and share our war stories.